On the Zero Wasted Days podcast, I want to inspire you to push the boundaries of what's expected in your life and your business, to challenge norms and your growth edges, and to go after the most audacious dreams, because I've seen for myself that anything is truly possible when you have a vision and are ready to go after it. Are you ready to jump in? Let's go. Hello, and welcome back to this week's episode of Zero Wasted Days. You are joining us in January of 2024. I'm so excited for the guests that I have lined up, and especially for this conversation with Ashley Meadah. Ashley is the host of the Glow Getter podcast, the Glow Getter Conference. She is a business coach, a speaker. She has been seen on the Globe and Mail, CTV News, in lots of different media outlets across Canada and the US, and I'm delighted to have Ashley joining me here today. So welcome, Ashley.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Ashley, we share one common thing that I know so far, which is being Canadian.
Yes.
And before we hit record, I said how much I loved having conversations with Canadians. So I'm chuffed to be here having a conversation with you today. And I would just really love to get to know the Ashley behind the podcast, behind the conference, behind the business coach that we see on Instagram. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got to where you are right now.
Oh, such a good question. Okay, so what I would start with is that I'm originally from Ontario, like we were just talking about in Canada. And back quite a few years ago now, I made the move out west. And when I made that move out west, it was just after graduating high school, figuring out what I was going to do, what that looked like. And I ended up working for an event planner. And it wasn't exactly what I was planning on doing. Initially, I was planning on going to college in Toronto for fashion industry. So when I came to Alberta, I quickly realized it was not the capital of fashion in Canada. So I had to really rethink what that looked like. So when I started working for this event planner, I had worked on events like fashion shows back in Ontario. So I was like, oh, maybe this could be the thing. So I remember taking my event planning certificate and I went right into event planning, like full in, and I fell in love with it. And I quickly realized there was a lot of community events that were needed here. And at that point in time, a lot of people weren't familiar with independent event planners. There was a lot of in-house and big corporations, but that was really it. So instead of trying to attract all of these clients, that was a little more difficult, I ended up deciding to create my own community events. So this is really where it all began. I started with a fashion show, working with all these local small business owners that had clothing stores and boutiques, and even some of the box stores that came in and were a part of it as well, and had this amazing women's night. And a couple of years after that started, I got asked to do a local bridal show. And so then I was pulling all these wedding professionals together to do an event, another fashion show, of course, included. And so I kept the whole fashion part of it together. But what I started noticing is that these events, I would often do trade shows. There was a trade show portion. And so that really enabled me to be working with all these small business owners. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was working with them and hearing all of this like feedback from them of what they were looking for, how they needed support, where they were struggling in their business. And I remember thinking, okay, we need to do something for these small business owners. There's so many here. There's so many that are out there, and there's just not a lot. You don't know. And now internet was just picking up. This was like 2008, 2009. Facebook was just becoming a thing. Instagram didn't even exist yet. And I remember thinking, what if we did an event here? And what I kept hearing is a lot of the times entrepreneurs here couldn't afford to go to big events like in Toronto or into the US because a lot of times small business owners don't have big budgets, and what they do they put back into their business. So I started thinking, what if we just bring something here? What if I brought speakers here and I start just create something for us right here? So here I am just outside of Edmonton thinking that I'm going to attract like an hour radius of small business owners. That's typically who comes in for my events. That would be great. And so then one of my biggest things that I do, and you'll see this on my Instagram now that I've always kept with me, is that I'm constantly polling my audience. Like I really want to know what everybody is looking for, what they're needing, what they're wanting, where they're struggling, like how I can help. That's one of my biggest things. And I didn't recognize this. I've done this from day one. And that's what I was doing that first event. And I was like, okay, who do you want to hear? Who do you want to learn from? And the name that kept coming up was Arlene Dickinson from CBC's Dragon's Den. Everyone loves her story, loves how she supports businesses. And I was like, I have to find a way to get Arlene here. And
Amazing.
I was like, I'm not sure how I'm going to do this, but we'll figure it out. Like, I know
Yeah.
she's a very busy woman. She does not take many events. She has a very busy filming schedule between Calgary and Toronto. And in 2014, I booked and worked with Arlene Dickinson and brought her in
Wow.
to cameras. And when I did that, that was for me, it was like a big aha moment where I realized, okay, I can make big things happen. If I set my mind
Mm.
to something, I know I can figure that out. I've done that my entire life in different things, but I started recognizing just the power of goal setting and what that could
Yeah.
look like of bringing something to life. The interesting thing too was that once that event went off and it was huge, people started coming in from all over. That hour radius was like blown out of the water. I had people come in from all across Canada. I had a group from the
Wow.
Yukon contact me and asked to fly in for this. I had women that had heard about it through people that had flown to the States. So we had US residents coming up as well. I don't know what's happening here, but it was just so cool. And so for me, what I realized was that year I started getting asked, okay, how did you do that? How
Mm.
did you work social media to promote that? Because you had such a crazy far reach. It wasn't just like this local
Yeah.
1 hour radius. And so during that time, I had started doing more events and I started taking on clients at that point in time. And I started in the wedding industry. So here I am doing events and weddings, about like 30 to 40 a season of weddings alone. I'm
Wow.
running this conference, and then I'm starting to get asked to do coaching and helping people and business owners get on social media and strategize in their business. So fast forward over from 2014 to about 2000, right up until the pandemic, I was still doing
Mm.
all of that and coaching on the side.
Oh
And then
my
when the
gosh.
pandemic hit, I was like, okay, there's no more events. What are we going to do? So everything got paused on that side of my business, and I was able to go full-time coaching. And I
Mm.
just went straight into it. I just dove right into it. And truthfully, I've never looked back. So I stopped accepting client events. And now relaunched my conference this year after the pandemic.
Oh, cool.
And that's where I am now doing this full time. And so I've made that like major switch.
Wow, wow, wow. You really sound like someone who just dives into
Yep.
things. One of the things that I often talk to my clients about is not getting too hung up on all the steps to get to somewhere. So obviously, if you're quite goal oriented, you would also be an event and as an event planner, make some efforts and concentrate on the detail. How do you keep a balance between the detail and all the things that you know you need to do to get to where you need to get to? And also keep the energetic belief in where you're going without getting too stressed and overwhelmed by all the list of and the to-dos.
Yeah, that's a good question because I think that it's very easy to get caught up in those details and get caught up in, like you said, hung up on just all of the little moving parts. So, one of the big things for me is sometimes even just like starting with writing the goal down and then just also leaving it, like not necessarily full on focusing on it and obsessing over it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's definitely that balance there that sometimes you just have to step back from it and just see how it plays out. Because I think if you try to force something, that doesn't always work in the best way for you either.
Mm.
So I would say one of the first things I do, and what was interesting about this year was initially at the beginning of this year, I didn't plan on running the conference again. I was thinking, oh, you know what? I'll plan a few years out. It's going to take some time. And so what I kind of joke about is that I actually wrote it down on my vision board, which is right there. And I just left it and I just played with it. And then it was interesting because just how it all played out with how some things just flowed together, came
Mm.
together, and then all of a sudden it was happening. So sometimes I feel like if you feel like you have a goal and you're really trying to make it happen, sometimes
Mm.
taking a step back and just allowing the universe
100%.
to just let things fall into place, sometimes that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's one of the things I tell my clients every day is to really just put it out there, but it's also so much around the feeling of how you show up for it every day and not death grip and control every little aspect, because as soon as we start
Yeah.
to control all of those little pieces, is that it just feels desperate, like you said, that it's that
Yeah.
lack kind of energy that doesn't
Hmm.
feel good, and I think it blocks people from getting to where they want to get to. I love that. And so you put it on your vision board, and you went from probably not doing, or at least not a date in the calendar, at January 1st, 2023. And the date was, what was the day you had the actual conference? October?
Yes, so it was October
Yeah.
25th, 26th that it
Yeah.
actually happened this year.
Yeah. And so what were some of the things that made it happen? Was it like some big speakers that kind of came to the forefront and things like that? Or what was it that kind of made it happen?
Okay, I have the funniest story for you about this whole situation. What I will do is I'm going to take it back to how I launched my podcast and then how this came into place as well
Mm,
this year. When I had hired my very first virtual assistant back in 2018, I had said to her, she lived locally, so it was nice that we could actually get together in person
mm,
initially. And I said, I had so much going through my mind of everything I wanted to accomplish in the year ahead. It was the end of the year. I said, okay, you're on board. I'm so excited to have you here. There is so much that I'm doing and wanting to work towards. At this point in time, I was still doing weddings and events because
yeah.
this was right before the pandemic. And I said, I need you to come over and we're going to have a meeting and I'm just going to lay everything out that's in my brain for you.
Mm,
And so I started
best
this
way.
sticky note exercise all in the way to just say, okay, this is like what you need to know of what I'm working on, what is like currently happening and what's coming up. And so I said, I want to talk to you about some of the goals I have for next year, or just what I call 1 day goals. So
Yeah.
there are so many times that I hear people say, one day I'm going to do this, or one day I
Yeah.
hope I achieve this. It's just a common phrase. So I wrote down one day I want to launch a podcast.
Yeah.
And so we started talking about that. And then she's, okay, let's just talk a bit more. Like, do you know what that looks like? And I was like, I have no idea at this point. Like, I don't know what it takes, like tech wise, or, just
Mm,
all of the things that you need to plan out, how you get guests, like all of those things. Now, the idea behind that was I had taken a pause on the conference right around that time. And I was thinking what I wanted to do next with it. And I thought, the podcast would be a way to connect with more incredible women, continue
mm,
sharing stories, and also sharing them in a wider area. Like I could reach again across Canada, US, and worldwide this way. That's the whole idea behind the podcast. And what was really funny about it is once I wrote it down on that sticky note saying 1 day goal, 2.5 months later, it was in the works and it was
of course
happening.
it was.
Exactly. So there's a stat that I love that it's 42% you're more likely to achieve a goal if you write
Mm,
it down. And even if it says 1 day, and I just love that
yeah.
stat because I fully believe in it. That is what happened that year. And then it started happening. And what I started recognizing is that when I would say I wrote down a 1 day goal or have a goal that I wanted to achieve at some point in time, one of the first steps I always recommend to do is start researching what that looks like. Because for me, that's all it took with a podcast. I just had to research what I needed to do. And then that gave me my answers. Something I want to do? Is this something I want to put energy and time into? What does that look like? And for me, it was all yes. It was all like a heck yes. It wasn't just like I'll think about it and then come back to it. It was like, I can do this. Like, I can figure this out. And then it launched early 2019, the podcast launched. And so that was to me was like, okay, if I write these down, this is what helps. So fast forward to this year. This is where if you went back to January for me, I would have been like, oh yeah, like doing a conference again, that would be like 2024, 2025. That kind of goal. I have a lot of research I still have to do. So what ended up happening is I had a client of mine that was a coaching client that also was running an event in Jasper Park Lodge, which is in Alberta,
Mm,
Canada, and it's a Fairmont property. And so I had gone with her to do a site visit, and with my event planning background, it ended up working well for me to support her in that area as well. So here I am at one of the most beautiful places in the world. And
stunning.
I remember saying to this new Fairmont representative that we were working with earlier this year, saying, yeah, one day I really hope like I could bring my see, this is where it's dangerous.
One
Say
day.
1 day
Yeah.
goal out loud, and that's what happens. So I said to her, one day I would love to bring my conference here. What a magical place this would be to have somewhere that women entrepreneurs could come in, be distraction free. Like the
Mm.
Jasper Park Lodge, for anybody that's listening that is not familiar with it, it is like its own little, I don't want to say island, but there's lakes surrounding it and it's out by
Oh, it's just
itself. Like
heaven.
it is like the
Yeah.
town site's 10 minutes away. It's just beautiful. And
Heavenly.
I
Yeah.
just started visualizing what it would look like to have women there and
Mm.
to have them walking around. It's all like cabins. And so they'd be walking around the property and connecting and seeing each other
Oh,
and
so
saying, oh, I
good.
know you from Instagram. And like, we've never met, but I followed you. And I could just kept visualizing this, like coming together and just everybody in one space, right? Not where it was like an event in the city where you just
Yeah,
come
where
and then
everyone
go
leaves.
home. It was like everybody
Mm.
is there and really present. And that's what I was visualizing. So she's, oh, so like when would you be interested? I can get you some dates. And I was like, oh no, I don't even know what that looks like yet. It's like a 1 day goal, like maybe 2024, 2025. Maybe send me some information on what it looks like to work with the Fairmont, but at this point in time, I'm not entirely sure this would be something right away.
Yeah.
So she said, okay, I'll get you some information. She's like, who would you have speak? And I was like, oh, I have at this point in time, I've always brought in a variety of speakers. So every
Mm,
conference I did, including Arlene's, I always had someone that was like a celebrity success and
yeah.
then a lot of different speakers at a variety of success levels because I wanted to show the audience that there's success in so many different ways
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
many different levels, right? And so that was always my strategic goal behind the event. So she's like, so who would your speaker be? And I was like, I have no idea. I'll have to get back to you on that because I need to know that first before I really start
Yeah.
thinking about it. So this is where it gets funny. A week later, after this conversation, I wake up and I am not a super early morning person. And I woke up randomly at 5 in the morning. And so that's really early for me. And I was
Mm.
like, I just sat up in bed going, so if I were to do this, who would I bring in? So I could tell that like the mind was
She was a
spinning.
clever
And
salesperson asking you that question.
right, exactly. It was very smart. So the first thing I said to myself was, I know who my one day goals are, like Jenna Kutcher and Amy Porterfield, Mel Robbins, and these names are just
Mm,
swirling through my mind. I was like, I should just take my own advice and I should research what it looks like to work with some of these incredible women. I have no idea.
yeah.
Most of them don't take a lot of, like Jenna, for example, doesn't take a lot of events. And I know
Yeah.
Amy and Mel, they're constantly booked. I have
Yeah.
no idea what this looks like, but I said, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to figure this out unless I do some research, right?
Yeah.
So here I am at 5:30 in the morning, typing an email,
I love
reaching out to
it.
get some information because I'm like, I need to know this. If I ever want to
Yeah.
plan it, I know I need this information.
Yeah.
So here I send off this email and I go back to sleep and I don't think anything of it. And this is where sometimes it's like you write the goal down and then you just leave it and see what
Yeah. You
happens,
asked.
right? Exactly. I made the ask, and that was like the next step was just like putting it out there. 2 days later, so that was a Wednesday, 2 days later, I heard back from a particular speaker's team saying,
Mm.
I actually think she would love this, but can you send us more information? And I was like,
Oh my
oh,
God.
oh, oh, okay. So this is serious. So I spent the entire weekend drafting up the most biggest email you could think of,
I love it.
but the most detailed email because I really
Yeah.
wanted to describe like my vision and my goal behind
Mm,
it and like what I wanted to achieve from running this event again and why I was bringing it back, what I did before, what it would look like now, where it was being held, like the
mm.
vision there. So it was an extremely detailed email. And so that Monday morning, I sent it off to that particular speaker. And 2 hours later, I heard back from the amazing Jenna Kutcher herself and
Oh my
saying she
gosh.
loved the vision and was absolutely in. And
Oh my,
I
amazing.
couldn't believe it. I'm going to be 100% honest. I fangirled a little bit. I was like, went into shock a little bit. Jenna has the biggest heart and is like the sweetest person. And
Mm,
we just connected so well, just sharing such similar mission and vision, working and helping women and impacting
mm.
women. And we started talking, and then she said, okay, let's work on some dates. And the next thing you know, October 25th, 26th, 2023 is in the works. And I just have to say,
Wow.
the funniest thing was going back to that beautiful Fairmont representative saying,
Yeah.
I'm going to need dates and I'm going to need dates now.
Yeah.
So it's such
Wow.
an interesting story of like how I started at the beginning of the year of it being a 1 day goal. And by doing some research, making an ask,
Yeah.
there's just so many amazing lessons in that and setting a goal like that.
100%. That is so good. I'm big on setting intentions, and
Hmm.
I think sometimes it's like we operate so much in autopilot. We get up every day and we everything's on autopilot, but that autopilot is largely the
Yes.
fact that we operate in our subconscious, right? Like everything we do is in our
Hmm.
subconscious until we actually bring something into our awareness or our consciousness, and we're like, I want to do that thing, and we make the ask, and as
Yep.
soon as we make the ask, then we're open. We obviously have to be open to receive the thing, and you
Yes.
did the thing, and look at what
Yep.
happened. I think it's so inspiring for other
Thank you.
women who are listening, because we get in our own way, right? We get in our own
Yep.
way. We're like, of course she's never going to say yes to me. I think it's also really beautiful because I say this to my clients all the time: drop into the feeling of the program
Mhm.
or of the event. I got goosebumps thinking about walking around Jasper Park Lodge and the feeling, the essence of what you created. You
Exactly.
translated that obviously so well into an email that went to her that she was
Yeah.
like, bam, yes. And then you were looking at dates. I just really love all of that coming together. And
Thank you.
the date came and went, the event came and went. And was it
Yes.
extraordinary?
Oh, it was. And it's what you were saying about when you were feeling goosebumps and visualizing, watching it come to life and unfolding exactly how I imagined was one of the most magical things I
Mm,
have ever seen.
mm,
Watching the women and like how people connected and like people were out walking on the walking paths around the lake and just walking to their cabins and people were running into each other. And I kept running into people saying the same thing. It's like, I follow you on Instagram, but I don't know who you are. We've never met in
oh,
person, but
yeah,
I feel like I know you. And things like that. It was just,
yeah.
I can't even describe the magic it felt like to be
Mm,
there and have everyone feel fully present. And the biggest feedback I got was that they wanted to be there longer. They wished it was like a day or two longer because they just wanted
yeah.
to sit with everybody and the collaborations that came and the connections that were made and friendships that were developed. Like it was just amazing. And the feedback coming back, like there are so many women that have reached out after and said like this
Mm,
changed my life in this way and I've already like I've already
oh,
taken action. I had one
oh,
girl
so
that
good.
went back to her business 2 days after and cut half her client list because she wants to go in a new direction and has a whole new vision but didn't feel like she had time to design that new
Yeah,
vision. And right,
so
and then
good.
there was one woman that messaged me and said there's a group of 5 to 10 of us that now are getting together monthly because we've connected and we
So
want
good.
somebody that feels that same synchronicity and
Yeah,
support and goals. So I just, I love that. That was my vision. And I told Jenna that from day one. I just want to make impact. I just want to
yeah.
change lives. I want to connect these incredible women, put them together in one room.
Mm.
I can't even imagine the magic that's going to be created here.
So good. And when women come together in community and connect together, especially in person events, it is just,
Yes.
yeah, it's something that we not just missed during COVID, but I think
Yep.
just a lot of women in entrepreneurship start to try to go out
Mm,
on their own, and it's a lonely place, right? So the
it
minute that you can
is.
start to actually connect with others and realize that you don't have to do it alone, it's this little light
Exactly.
bulb goes off. And
Exactly.
yeah, for me at least, in masterminds and running my own and all that kind of stuff, it's
Hmm.
just the in-person thing just takes it to the next level. And you would obviously
Agreed.
concur with live events, like live events are going to
Yep.
continue to be a part of your world. Are you doing it again next year?
Yes, so this is the million-dollar question right now is that everybody's going, okay, so when is it next year? Where is it going to be? I had so many people just say, can I just buy a ticket now? So details are in the works right now.
Okay.
There is a couple of really unique and exciting things that I'm working on,
Mm.
and the best thing I will give a little bit of a teaser right now is that the group of incredible speakers, Jenna and Dr. Jody and Selena and Tanya and Sheetal, they're in for doing it in another location. So maybe
Oh,
taking it a bit on the
wow.
road. So that's all I'm going to say right now. But we're
So
looking
exciting.
at that. So yes,
Watch this
there's
space.
opportunity. One of my biggest, so I'm going to say it right here, and then we'll see
Mm.
by the end of this
Yeah, yeah.
2024 how it comes. But my goal, my 1 day goal right now is to do a hometown edition and take it back to Ontario. So
Oh, that
that's
would
all I
suit
can say
me.
right
Let's just
now.
say that. That would suit me. Then again,
Fabulous,
Jasper Park, yeah,
fabulous.
Jasper Park Lodge sounded pretty amazing, but Ontario is a little
Right?
bit more accessible.
Yes, exactly. And I had a lot of people from the East Coast that were wishing that they
Mm,
could attend, and it's not always possible. Again, same
yeah,
thing. I was talking about starting this event, and everybody in Alberta feeling like that they can't go to Toronto or the US for
yeah.
events. Sometimes Ontario feels the same way about the Western events. So, yes, that's my big goal with this is to take it on tour. So, stay tuned.
Amazing. That's so good. And we've talked a lot about events, a lot about speaking and your background. And just, I'm going to just change, not tact a little bit, but I'm just going to ask a
Yeah.
question just around, because obviously this podcast is called Zero Wasted Days. And my work personally as a life first business coach is all about creating this business that is the means to us living life first. And I would just love to know, you're busy, you have a
Mhm.
full calendar of things, how you prioritize your life while also running
Mhm.
a sizable business.
Totally. This is a great question. And it's funny because this was actually a question that came up at the conference when we did a speaker panel at the end.
Yeah.
And that was one of the questions that actually got asked a few times about just
Mm,
like, how do I manage it all when there's so much
mm,
going on? And I think
yeah,
that's a good question for a lot of people because there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that they're very busy, they're on the go,
it's hard.
and you're wondering how they manage that. For me, one of the biggest things I recognize is my schedule weekly and having
Mm,
boundaries. When I first started my business, especially even the coaching business, the first year of COVID, I felt for others so much because I knew so many people were struggling. The COVID, like the pandemic was such a shock to entrepreneurs.
yeah.
And so people were just scrambling. And so I think what I learned that year was that I didn't have boundaries at that point in time. I was just filling my calendar, accepting people anywhere I could, anytime I could. And I quickly realized burnout is real. And when you don't have
Mm,
those boundaries in place, that is one of the biggest things. For me, what I do is I look at my week, and this is an exercise I do with a lot of my clients where I walk them through what they want their ideal work week to be. I always look at, for example, on Mondays is what I call an empire day. So that is my day to work on my business, not in my business. And
yeah.
there are so many entrepreneurs that don't or feel like they run out of time and don't get a chance to work on their business, right? Like it's so
Yeah.
common. So for me to have a dedicated day for that is just huge.
Mm,
It also gets me excited for Mondays because I love working on my business. I love thinking
yeah.
about what's next. I love getting creative. So Mondays for me are that. I have specific days like Tuesdays and Wednesdays are often my call days with my clients. So those are
Hmm.
blocked off in that sense because I used to just put everybody wherever I could fit them.
All
And
over.
now I'm
Yeah.
like, this is makes way more sense. People will find it in their calendars. They'll figure it out, right? Like if I give them
Yeah.
set
Yeah.
dates instead of just saying what works best for you and just trying to fit them, giving them dates and just saying, here's my availability. How does it
Yeah.
match with yours? That often makes it such a smoother transition. Quite often on Thursdays, for example, I do amazing podcast recordings, working on my own interviews, and I leave that part open that day. And then Fridays, I always take off. That's my day
Mm,
off. And I love a 3-day weekend. So for me, I fill it however I want. If it is like
yeah.
for fun, personal, if there's maybe something that has come up that I get to do, sometimes I travel for speaking engagements. So I leave that Friday open. The other thing that I really prioritize is in the mornings, I have a health commitment. So for me, I am
Mm,
never one to get up and rush and jump into any work. That to me is, it doesn't feel good for me. And then I feel like I would not
mm,
also perform as well for clients or for podcasts, that kind of thing. So for me, the mornings are like my health time. So going to the gym, yoga,
yeah.
meditation, journaling, that kind of thing. So that
Yeah.
really helps. And what's interesting is this year when I was getting busy with the conference, I found myself going back to I just got to fit people in again. And I was like, nope, I had to refresh
Yeah.
the boundaries there because it's easy to
Yeah.
do when we get busy. And as entrepreneurs, we want to just dedicate so much time and energy to our businesses all the time. But that's what leads to
Totally.
burnout really fast.
100%, 100%. And we see it every day with our clients
Yes,
and not holding those boundaries and not
yeah,
prioritizing ourselves, right? So you're prioritizing yourself
exactly.
every day as
Mhm.
the most important thing because if you're not taking care of your health, and I can tell you, I'm late 40s and it starts to catch
Mhm.
up on you. And there's
It
these thing
does.
called perimenopause and menopause that no one tells you about. So by the time you get there, you're like, oh
Right.
my gosh. So
Yeah.
actually prioritizing your health and prioritizing you in
Mhm.
the morning is the best thing. One of the habits I've seen so many women fall into the habit of
Mhm.
is checking their emails and their Instagrams and things right like almost from bed, sometimes in
Yes.
bed, and how
Right.
that can and when you do it, and I've done it, of course, we're all guilty of
Yep.
it. It
Yep.
can really take you down the slippery slope because all of a sudden you're like, oh, I sent that message to that person and they didn't get back to me. And oh, look at that.
Right.
She's launching that. Why am I not doing that? And then all of a sudden you're like, "Ooh," and before you even made your coffee, or you're trying to get your
Exactly.
kids out the door in the morning, you're down
Yep.
the slippery slope. So I love
Yep.
that you really dedicate that morning time slot to yourself, and then it's all mission go after that.
Right, exactly. And it's so funny because I literally just had this conversation with a client yesterday because we were literally just talking about how easy it is for us to check our emails, look at social media
Mm,
first thing in the morning. Our like phone technology is just so accessible, right? And
yeah,
so it's just it's there. Often we have the phones beside our bed, so it's the first
yeah,
thing we think of when we wake up. And
yeah.
but it can also totally change the course of your day by getting an
Mm,
email that maybe just puts you in a different kind
100%.
of mood, or like you said, like thinking of your to-do list, or did I do that? Have I done that? And it immediately takes you into that. And so one thing that I love from Marie Forleo, who said it, is
Mm,
to create before you consume, because it is so
mm,
easy to
yes.
get caught up in everybody else's to-do list or their
Yeah,
content, or right.
yeah.
And that's quite often what happens is our email inbox is somebody else's to-do
Mm.
list, but we often take it on as our own to-do list. And so when you look at it, you're thinking, okay, I got to do this. I got to work on this later, right? I got to respond to this person. And so what I love is that idea. There have been times, and I am 100% guilty of looking at my phone in the morning.
Mm,
What I have noticed, though, the very first time I launched the conference, I actually did this really fun thing where I did pre-sale tickets and I set those emails every day to go out at 10 a.m. So for
mm.
me, it felt like if I set it at 10 a.m., I didn't actually have to be in the office till 10. And it got me excited to go look at my inbox, but I would wait and
Yeah,
hold off until 10 a.m. So
yeah.
what I would start to do is I started to put my phone in airplane mode. So every night when
Mm,
I went to bed, it went into airplane mode, and it was something that I made sure I didn't look at until 10 a.m. I didn't turn it back
yeah.
on till 10 a.m. And so I would get up, I would have breakfast, I would take my dog for a walk. It was the most peaceful morning and the best way to start my day. And then I was
Yeah.
actually super excited to get into my office at that 10 a.m. mark every day, right?
Good
So for
idea.
me, I noticed that was like a big change is just the shift of airplane mode. No notifications in
Mm,
the morning, nothing. Like
yeah.
it was a very peaceful way to get up and start the day.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's an easy thing to slip into because it can also feel
Mhm.
good. You're like, oh, look, that reel that I put on yesterday got this many comments. Like, I can do this.
Exactly.
It makes you feel wanted. It makes you feel loved. It makes you feel all the
Yes.
things that our nervous system is asking us to validate. And so
Yes.
it's normal, but it's
It
also like
is
putting
very
up
normal.
better boundaries around that can really protect your energy
Yeah,
when it's everything. When you then sit down at your desk at 10 and you haven't gone down that
exactly.
comparisonitis, or all of a sudden you're feeling
Right.
doubt about your program over somebody else's, and it really
Yeah,
changes the game if we can have better boundaries. A reminder for all of us.
exactly. Yes, exactly. So true.
And one of the things you did mention, to go back to speaking in events,
Yeah.
is, and just obviously it's tweaked something in my mind, because I have a lot of
Mhm,
clients who over the next couple of years are have that
mhm,
one day goal of, I want to write a book, I want to
mhm.
launch the podcast, but a lot of them also do want to raise their profile in terms of speaking. And so I would
Right.
just love to know, as someone who has, you have a unique perspective because you've run
Yes.
conferences, you're also a speaker, and I think it's just gold to be able to ask you the question about what people can do to get on stage for the first time and what you would suggest
Mhm.
for them to do to grow that part of their businesses.
Oh, such a good question because I think the speaking industry is something that there a lot of people are interested in, but it can be a little bit scary. There's
Yeah.
people that are of course nervous or afraid of public speaking.
Mm,
There is getting an idea of what it is your messaging is. So I find that speaking can be very similar to social media, right? You're finding your unique message, secret sauce of what it is that you share. And so I want you to think it's the same idea of what you show up on, say, your Instagram stories and how you connect with your current community. And so I always try to envision it that way when I think about speaking and how
mm,
I connect with people. So, what I do love is just like you said, I love that I have this really fun, unique perspective from an event planner as well as a speaker, because quite often it's one or the other, right? And
yeah.
so it's been really fun for me to help others in the speaking world. One thing I would say is starting with your messaging and understanding what
Mm,
it is. This goes for anybody that wants to speak on stage, on podcast, on your social, right? It
yeah.
is figuring out what the messaging is and being really aware of what the audience is going to take away.
Mm,
Because I think sometimes when people think about speaking or going on podcasts, they're like, oh, I have a message, or I just want people to come and follow me or come to my
mm,
community and buy. But they don't often think about, okay, how can I give value to that podcast host
yeah.
community? What can the
100%.
audience, what can the listeners really take away from today's episode, right? Same thing with speaking. So if somebody hears you speak, what are they going to
Mm,
walk away with? And what's
mm,
been interesting for me is when I have had my event, I always have been very strategic with the speakers in saying, I want to know what the tangible takeaways are for the audience.
mm,
This isn't not about
yeah.
you just coming and sharing your story and hoping everybody has a great day. It is very much about, okay, what are the audience going to learn from you? What are they going to take
Mm,
away? What can they go and implement back into their business, for example? So it
yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean that your audience of your message is business owners, but what is the audience going to take away from your presentation? And I always usually ask 2 to 3 takeaways. So as an event planner, I want to know from a speaker, what are the takeaways? At least have a couple, so 2 to 3, of what lessons or what actionable items or takeaways that they can go and implement right away and
Yeah.
make change, right? So having clear messaging, having those clear takeaways, that is some of the most important things. And have a
Mm,
call to action. So you see this on social media. You've probably heard this all the time, is like in your posts, have call to action. Same thing. Like
yeah.
when you go on a podcast, when you speak on stage, have a call to action. Don't just leave everybody hanging, not sure how to
Yeah.
take the next step. Like maybe they've heard some of these takeaways and now they're like, so how do I do that? Give them a
Yeah.
call to action, give them a simple step that they can also take away. That
Beautiful.
is some of the most important things I think as a speaker. And it's not just about showing up and giving a good speech. It's like, how are you going to make an impact when you leave that stage?
Yeah. Oh, those are really good, tangible ways that people can, and I'll
Yes.
be using for my clients as well.
Sure.
Because, yeah, it's about the end result of the impact that
Hmm.
you're making on that audience. It's not actually about
Exactly.
you at all. Like, you might be sharing your
Exactly.
story, And I
Yes.
get so many different requests to come on my podcast, as you probably do.
Yeah.
And people,
Mhm.
it's all about themselves. They're like, me, here's my profile, here's
Right.
my bio. And I'm like, hold on. And then I look at them, I'm like, you're not very relevant to my audience. But the ones that do
Exactly.
take the time and really
Yes.
think about the value they're going to add, I'm like, yes, that's perfect.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yes.
that's great that it's the same sort of model. And so do you get a lot of requests like by email, or I guess it would probably be
Yes.
by email, yeah, for different
Yeah.
future conferences? And so how can somebody, like, stand out amongst the crowd, whether it's in a podcast request,
Mhm.
well, I've just mentioned one of the things you can do, but also in speaking at conferences?
One of the biggest things I look for as an event planner, and I'm very known for my events to be very strategic with my speakers. So I
Mm,
may open up an application for one slot, but majority of the time I already know who I want based on my research that I've done. And when I do research for an event for looking for speakers, I'm looking
mm,
at how they connect with their communities. I'm looking at how they
mm,
speak, like even seeing by video. So, say there's a speaker that maybe doesn't have a speaker video, like a teaser reel
mm,
yet of different other events that you've done. So, if you don't
yeah,
have that yet, that's okay. What I would do is I would direct people back to your, say, Instagram, where they can see you connect with your community. Because
yeah,
for me, I can direct people very easily to go watch my Instagram stories because I show up there with my face on a regular basis. And
yeah,
that's where a lot of my community connects me with. And so that's also where I get speaking engagements from or podcast
yeah,
interviews from, is because people feel
yeah.
like they've got to know me through that. So if you don't have a video or past experience yet,
Mm.
direct people over to your Instagram and then also show up. Make sure you're showing up on there too.
Yeah, actually show up there.
So they, right? So you show your face and you connect there. But that's some of the most like simplest free tool that you
That's a
can
great
really
idea.
utilize for that. So that's one of my favorite places to go and connect and look at speakers and review what they do and how they show up,
Yeah,
because that's just such an easy way to do it. And they're most likely you're going to be doing that regularly anyways. So why not direct
yeah.
people there?
Oh, I love that. I'm going to use that myself.
Sounds good.
Because I love a story. I love Instagram.
Right. Me
Um,
too. Me too.
yeah, it's good. That's really tangible. I think that's really helpful for people because it's something that they can walk away and actually try to do tomorrow.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
the thing. And I think a lot of times, like when you think about the speaker world, you feel like you have to have everything created. You have to have
Oh,
your speaker
yeah.
bio, you have to have a one page, you have to have video ready, you have to have
Yeah.
samples, you have to have audio clips. And if somebody's starting out, they may not have that yet, right?
That's right.
And Instagram is the easiest place. That's something that you can do no matter what
Yeah.
at any time. You can start. Maybe somebody's listening today and thinking, oh, I haven't been showing up in my stories, but there's no
Yeah.
time like the present, just by getting on and starting and connecting with your community. And
Mm,
one thing I will say is that there are quite often a lot of people worried about showing up on stories because of just
mm,
the fear, the anxiousness, the
sure.
worry about talking on video. And so my biggest
Yeah.
tip for talking on video is a reminder that even if you have 100 followers, 500 followers, 1,000 followers, 10,000 followers, nobody is sitting in a group listening to your message. Everybody is
No.
sitting one-on-one on their phone, and I
Yeah.
want you to imagine it like you're having a one-on-one conversation with somebody in your
Mm,
community and
yeah.
talking like we are right now. I'm
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
envisioning right now talking to a mass audience. I'm envisioning us having a conversation and maybe some
Yeah.
people listening at the next table over. That's what I really think that a lot of people also get caught up on when they think about showing up
Yeah.
on their stories. So if you're going thinking, okay, I want to speak, I'm not showing up on my stories,
Mm,
something that you can just easily take action on today is just show up and pretend and act like you're having a one-on-one conversation with your dream client or someone that's in your
yeah.
community that you connect really well with right now.
That's so good. Super tangible. I love that.
Always about the tangible tips.
Yeah, totally. And obviously you show up, and I think it's always been really important for me as well, that there's just this authenticity, realness. Obviously it's still
Yeah.
Instagram, and we have to realize that there's stuff behind the
Hmm.
scenes of the behind the scenes. How do
Hmm.
you stay in alignment with your values and stay true to who you are whilst you still have a public profile?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think my biggest thing is I enjoy showing up in the moment of things. So if I'm working
Yeah.
on something, I am a big believer in seeing behind the scenes. Like when I look at people that I follow, I love feeling like I've got to know them. And it doesn't mean that I have
Mm,
to know every single detail of everything they're doing. It just means
yeah.
that I feel like maybe I've had a sneak peek of where they're traveling or what they're doing with their family or just what they're doing in their business behind the scenes. And it just makes
Mm,
me feel connected to them. And so I think I
yeah.
try to do that as well. I feel like I want my community to feel the same way, like they know. So we have this ongoing joke where I have like a Christmas tree farm in the background right now. And it's just been this like ongoing thing because Canadian Tire have these beautiful Christmas trees. And I was like, I just want to decorate my office with these because it's just so serene. So just like little things like that, where this ongoing joke of my Christmas tree
Yeah,
farm that I've got in here and the Taylor Swift
I
song.
love.
It's just like little things like
Yeah.
that. Or people know, like my community knows how much I love the mountains or I love road trips. As soon as I post saying, oh, I'm on the road again, any guesses like of where
Yeah.
I'm going, people are like, you're going to the mountains, you're doing this. And people just
Yeah.
get really excited. And I think what I love about that is just, again, showing up real, showing up in the moment, sharing
Mm,
behind the scenes, and just making my community feel like they're a part of what I do. It doesn't mean they
yeah.
have to be a part of every single thing I do, but I
No.
just love showing them some of the things that really bring me joy because then I feel like it brings them joy and we're just all connected
Yeah.
that way.
And that's the word, is the connectedness
Yes.
and the resonance. Before they even really realize that they're connecting with you, that they're engaging with you,
Yes.
that it's telling the algorithm that you two are
Exactly.
connected, they're answering your little question box, where am I off to?
Yep.
They're feeling like an emotional connection to you. So that is just a really
Yes.
powerful kind of subtle way of
Hmm.
really getting an engaged audience in what you're
Yes.
doing. Like, I often share, I have chickens, and so sometimes like I'll go out and
I love it.
I'll feed the chickens, and people are like,
Yes.
"How's your chickens doing?" And then they weren't laying for a while, and people are asking me
Yeah.
about the chickens, and so it's not
So good.
everything of every day, right? I think that sometimes people think that you
Exactly.
have to share every single thing, and it's just these little
Right.
snapshots, and they can be repetitive. I think that repetitive nature, like you said,
Exactly.
is
Yep.
what actually people like, because they get to know you. They're like, "Oh,
Yes.
she's the one that does this, and she's the one that has the chickens," and
Exactly.
super smart, super smart.
Exactly. So true. So true. It was
Yeah.
really funny because, as an example, back a few years ago, I was showing up more and more in the mountains and I started doing some photo shoots down there. And one thing that I quickly learned is that a lot of my photos had me in the mountains. And so a lot of people actually started assuming I lived in the mountains and I was
Yeah,
okay
yeah,
with
yeah.
that. But but it was just funny how people, like when people started paying attention, but I had never outright said I didn't live in the mountains, so they wouldn't have known. It just appeared
Yeah,
that way. But again, by just showing like people showing consistently stuff that you're
yeah,
up to that people pay attention to. Yeah,
yeah.
it's such a neat tool for sure.
It is cool. Yeah, it is cool. And I always ask a final question, and I'm changing the
Okay.
question up for 2024.
Ooh,
So we
sounds
are getting to
great.
the end of our lovely, juicy conversation. But my new question to close out my episodes is around the words zero wasted days and in
Okay.
the concept of creating a life of your own design. So I would love to know how important this is for you and how you might be embodying this in your life.
I love that question. I think what I have recognized is, like you said earlier, where a lot of the times in entrepreneurship, when we first start out, we end up modeling other people's businesses and models and
Mm,
methods, and we're absorbing all this information. And I think slowly over time, we start recognizing what's working for us, what's not, boundaries, like we talked about today, just really understanding that. And I think for me, I recognize that I don't want to be working every day, all day. I love the quote out there that says, I didn't quit 9 to 5 to work 24/7, which is
so
often what
true.
happens in entrepreneurship, especially at the beginning. So I think for me, like recognizing that, like for my goal of 2024 is to have more fun in life and in business. And
Mm,
so that has been something that I've been playing with a lot, especially later in this year since the conference, is I want business owners to have more fun in business. I want to have more fun in my business.
totally.
And so I think for me is also creating that space. So when I think of boundaries, I think of a shorter work week. I think of that
Mm,
really truthfully like a 3-day work week. I think for me, it's creating that more fun, the more joy in my business
yeah.
and in my life. So that's really my
Yeah.
goal for 2024 and embodying that zero wasted days method.
So good. I love that. And it obviously resonates with me, especially the 3 days and the doing the things that you love to do and that spark joy for
Yes.
you and that make you feel like you're having fun. And it's not just about where you're trying to get to, it's actually the journey that you're trying to
Hmm.
enjoy, which we can so lose sight of as we're head down into in our businesses and trying to get to a certain place, and really where are we trying to
Exactly.
get to. And it is a big part of the whole kind of life first method. But sometimes
Yes.
we have to reteach ourselves, retrain ourselves how
It's
to
true.
have hobbies or how to have
Hmm.
fun. And because we go into corporate or we get so disconnected from
Yeah.
how to actually do it. I have clients that say, I don't know what to do when I'm not working. So we have to work on that, because
Right.
if you don't know how to feel that joy, then obviously that energy, that because it really,
Hmm.
when you're in your groove or when you're in the mountains, you're probably just high vibing. Like, you probably create the best
Yes.
content, you probably have the best calls
Yes.
and all that. It's because you're at that
Exactly.
frequency. And it's so
Yes.
powerful to relearn how to
Yes.
have a hobby again, or feel joy. So I love that. It's so
Exactly.
So zero wasted days.
Yes, exactly. I love it.
Wonderful. Ashley, I really appreciate you having the time today and having this conversation. It's just been super value adding. I really think that is a proper way of describing everything we've talked about. It's not a conversation I've had with anybody in the whole series last year. And the perspective you bring with events and speaking has just been really rich for me and for
Thank
my
you.
audience, I know. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so
Um,
much for
bef-
having me.
No problem, actually. And I do want to give you the opportunity to be able to tell people where they can find you and give them a call to action to be able to connect with you and look at you in your stories and find out more about the conference or the thing that's coming up for next year.
Aw, thank you so much. My biggest thing is Instagram, as I've been talking
Mhm.
about, finding me over on Instagram. That's my favorite place because I feel like it's not as like I find Facebook a little bit different and I use
Mm,
Facebook. It's not as much anymore, but it's not where you just have a profile. I feel like you really connect and you have the ability to connect
yeah,
with people one on one on Instagram. And I
yeah,
love that ability, the simplicity of that. So Instagram is my favorite place so that you can find me over there at Instagram at Ashley Meadah. And same, my website is ashleymeadah.com. Like I said, the best way, connect with me on Instagram. One of my favorite
yeah.
things is, of course, helping entrepreneurs with speaking and learning how to get on stages. So I actually developed a program that I'm coming out with in the new year to help women with that. And yeah, there's all kinds of different ways. I lead an annual mastermind of women that are like the go-getters, ready to take action and get
Mm,
results. And then, of course, I'm going to have details coming soon of next events. So just stay tuned to my
so
Instagram where I'll
exciting.
be teasing. That is something I'm really well known for, is teasing information and dripping information out. And again, I just, yeah, love Instagram. So that's the best way to connect with me.
Awesome. That's where I found you. And I was really
Wow.
enticed, and you teased out the Jenna Kutcher. And I was like, oh, how'd she get her? And then it brings people in. And yeah, well done. Your marketing and your
Thank
promotion
you.
worked on me.
Thank you. For me, again, it comes back to having that fun in the business. And
Yeah,
that's one
totally.
of my biggest lessons from 2023. So yeah, more fun
Mm,
for the next year ahead.
yeah, fabulous. Thanks, Ashley.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for joining me for this week's episode of Zero Wasted Days. I truly hope that you found it to be valuable and inspirational as you create and you grow your own business and work towards living more life first. I would love you to subscribe, to like this video, and of course, if you have any comments, drop them in here below. Also, if you tag me on socials, I would love to get to know you. I love connecting with my audience, so be sure to tag me at Suzanne Actison or at Zero Wasted Days _. And I will see you inside the DMs as well as here for the next episode next week.